Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 16th Empower Hour put on by Empower Our Future. Tonight featuring the City of Boulder's Climate Initiatives Department led by Interim Director Jonathan Koehn. I am your host, Paul Coleman. I'm a volunteer with Empower Our Future, a group of individuals in Boulder working to accelerate our progress to a socially just clean energy economy. Thank you all for attending and giving your attention to Jonathan Koehn and his team as they tell us about the work of the Climate Initiatives Department. But first, the preliminaries. We acknowledge that this land where we work, live, and play is the ancestral homelands and unceded territory of Indigenous peoples who have traversed, lived in, and stewarded lands in the high plains and the Rocky Mountains since time immemorial. These indigenous nations include Apache, Arapaho, Cheyenne, Comanche, Kiowa, Pawnee, Shoshone, Sioux, and Ute. Let me tell you a bit about some upcoming Empower Hours. So on July 21st, the third Thursday of July, Jeff Cypers of Sonoma Clean Power will talk about Sonoma Clean Power's hands-on boot up of community choice aggregation to accelerate renewables and incorporate sharing community benefits. This is relevant to us in Boulder because of the community choice energy study currently under discussion at the Public Utilities Commission. So you join us July 21st for that. On August 18th, the third Thursday in August, we're going to have a South Boulder Creek floodplain presentation from local and regional experts on hydrology, climate change mediation, and native rights claims of the largest remaining undeveloped floodplain along the Front Range. The preliminary list of panelists includes Gordon McCurry, Renee Millard-Chacon, and Stephen Tulleen. You can sign up for the upcoming Empower Hours at empowerourfuture.org. These Empower Hours are produced by the all-volunteer communications team of Empower Our Future, headed up by the brilliant work and brilliant leadership of Mary Pettigrew of Ampersand Graphic Design, and she is assisted by a host of other volunteers. If you'd like to get involved, contact us through our website, empowerourfuture.org. Okay, now for what you came to see, I will let the city staff introduce themselves. But I must say that they are, in my eyes, a very intelligent, hardworking group who have chosen to make a career of serving the residents of Boulder. So thank you all. So take it away, Jonathan Koehn.
Great. Thank you, Paul. Well, as Paul mentioned, my name is Jonathan Koehn. I am deeply honored, in fact, to serve as serve the Boulder community as the interim director of the Climate Initiatives Department. I have to start by thanking Empower Our Future, obviously, not just for being here, but for your longstanding commitment to climate action and clean energy. And just as your introduction really, I think, signifies for bringing such a broad and diverse group of voices to the Empower Hour. Really, really excited to be with you tonight. And I also want to send a thank you to everybody who's tuning in on such a gorgeous evening. Sitting in front of your computers can be a little tiresome, but tonight's going to be a good conversation, I think. So we have a full team tonight because, well, no one really wants to listen to me speak for an hour, but I will let each city staff member introduce themselves. Besides myself, you're going to hear from Jamie Harkins, Rella Abernathy, Carolyn Elam, Matt Lehrman, and Yael Gishon. So realizing we could take several hours to have this conversation, we are going to pack a lot into this presentation. I do appreciate right off the bat, everybody who submitted questions in advance. We are going to try our best to answer them throughout the presentation, but I do want to commit that we will provide written responses to all the questions that came in before tonight and those that we received tonight, and we'll put those in a summary document and make sure that everybody sees those. So my hope for this evening is that you can really get a glimpse of the comprehensiveness of our department's work. So what we're presenting is really just a small sampling of what's in motion. I also want to call out that we've heard questions of whether we are focused on the right things, or maybe that we're moving perhaps too slowly on certain actions or not being inclusive enough. And look, I have to say, skepticism is warranted given what's at stake. So one thing I know for sure is that we are all on the same side with the same outcome in mind, and that really gives me hope. I will share, if I have personally one regret, it's not fully tapping into the creative genius of our community as often as we could. There is no shortage of shining lights in Boulder. We have climate warriors who've been at this for 30 plus years. We have young voices and entrepreneurs who are really leading with a fresh perspective. And we need to get them the help they need to do even more and to go even faster and to exercise our collective knack for collaboration. So I also want to say how inspired I am by our staff team. Paul, I really appreciated that those comments in your introduction. You all may not interact with them directly, but I have to say this staff team's dedication and expertise is exceptional, and I feel so fortunate to work alongside them. So I hope the next 45, 50, 55 minutes or so at least gives you some sense that we are investing our community's resources wisely, and we're focused on the most impactful and transformative actions. So I have a few level setting slides to highlight how we're doing our work, and then you're going to hear briefly from each of the work areas. That's circular economy, natural climate solutions, and of course, energy. We hear from the community often that our approach has to be ambitious, but also deliverable, meaning our targets are one thing, but implementation is another. So throughout the presentation tonight, we're going to try to give specific examples of projects and programs that are in flight and those that are coming soon. Again, not going full of full suite of programs. And after that, we'll talk about the proposed climate tax. And once I said at the beginning, recognizing tonight is a lot of talking at, we're going to wrap with some next steps on how we intend to do some deeper engagement opportunities where staff can listen and take specific feedback from the community. So if we can go to the next slide, we'll jump right in. So generally speaking, this is something that shouldn't be new to this audience. Our efforts are really guided by our community's climate goals to reduce emissions 70% by 2030, reach net zero by 2035, and carbon positive by 2040. Also in 2030, you can see on that left-hand side of the screen, we aim to reach 100% renewable electricity with 100 megawatts of installed local renewable generation. So let me break that down. Achieving net zero emissions by 2035 is going to require a total transformation of the energy systems that underpin our economies. And reaching carbon positive really is going to require significant changes in land use planning and ecosystem regeneration. We can go to the next slide. So our progress, this is a little bit of a messy slide, but our progress lives in real time on the City of Boulder's Measures website. So this screen shows two screenshots of many screenshots that I could have pulled on our progress towards local renewables in the top left and overall community emissions as examples. There is a ton of detail on the website, including all of our annual inventories. We had a question about how do we do and when do we release our annual inventories? Currently, we're working to complete the 2021 inventory, which we typically release in late summer once all the data has been collected. So what I want to say here is that the goals you saw on that previous screen are hard and require changes outside of our direct control sometimes, which is why we dedicate a good amount of resource and staff time to our policy work, including at the state legislature, at regulatory agencies, and in collaboration with partners, other cities, and government agencies to achieve impact at larger scale. When we've set local targets, like local gen, for example, in the top left, you can see that we're on track to meet that goal of 100 megawatts by 2030. When we actually set those local targets that we do control, our community continues to meet and even exceed these. So we did meet our 2020 GHG and local gen targets early. That said, we know the next decade is going to require unprecedented changes to how our city operates and what each of us can do. And we do that by stepping up our efforts to switch from using fossil fuels, the biggest cause of climate change, and to use energy more efficiently. And we do that also by shifting to systemic changes in transport, in land use, in heating and cooling, in food production, and how we support nature and the vital functions it performs. So let's go to the next slide, please. What I was saying is it's important to underscore, I think, a point that we discussed at length with City Council last year, and that's that climate action now has to be understood in a broader context. While in the past, climate action meant almost exclusively reducing emissions by reducing fossil fuel combustion, we have to face the realities and impacts of climate change and the ways that those least responsible are often most vulnerable to them. And we've integrated equity as a foundational consideration to any actions we take. So now when we say climate action as a department, we're referring to actions that need to consider all three of these factors you can see on the screen. Our continued focus on reducing emissions and capturing carbon, our need to prepare our community to adapt and be resilient to climate change, and the integration of equity considerations. You can pop to the next slide. This was another question, and so I wanted to dig a little bit deeper here. We had a question that asked about how we are, in fact, bringing climate action into alignment with the city's racial equity goals. So our department has been doing quite a bit of work on climate justice over the last couple of years, because put simply, the effects of climate change are worse for some people. So as we plan for the future in which our weather is more unpredictable, threats of flooding and fires rise, and extreme heat days occur more frequently, equity has to be at the core of all of our efforts. So we utilize the city's racial equity instrument in evaluating our climate programs and projects, including unintended impacts on equity, and our staff actively engages with partners to ensure equity in our approach and our actions. So I want to mention two partnerships. If you're not aware of these organizations, it's really important to mention. Flows, which is a group out of CU Boulder. We have worked to support their work for the last 6 years. Flows really focuses on building trust with low income, BIPOC, LGBTQ, and immigrant communities. And they meet people in their own homes to really celebrate their existing sustainability practices and to develop a new dialogue around building leadership capacity and green job skills. And I would say, in addition to general support, we've been working with Flows and manufactured home park communities in their effort to support local food production and sustainable practices through a really interesting community garden mini grant program. The second organization is the Climate Justice Collaborative, or CJC. They were formed in March of 2021 by a group of community members, leaders of community-based organizations, city and county staff, and foundation staff members. So the CJC is really a frontline community member-led collaborative that creates and applies a racial equity framework and really starts looking for solutions to climate change at the local level. And we have been incredibly humbled and excited to learn from and partner with CJC to organize climate action across Boulder County on a greater scale. So you can expect to hear a lot more from these groups as we continue to ramp up. Last slide for me, if you don't mind. All right, so don't let your eyes blur at this one. This is really a screenshot from a number of slides that I could have chosen, but let me tell you what you're looking at here. Many of you have probably heard a lot of news about some of our heat mapping efforts. One specific project that intersects the two design principles of equity and resilience is our equity mapping project. So to build successful resilience efforts, we have to not only identify adaptation options and their cost and benefits, but also how we increase the adaptive capacity of human and natural systems. So through this collaboration with a number of partners, we're developing a new visual resource for climate information and actions. What we're already seeing is the unique challenges, I would say, that really different parts of the city and county are facing from increased temperatures, from floods and wildfire risk. What this screenshot shows, this is just, again, one, is heat island exposure in various parts of Boulder County. So the higher elevations on the left-hand side, obviously, are green. The red and more extreme and more vulnerable areas are in the red. Now, this is not very high resolution. But what I will share with you is that this is one of the layers that allow us to see the different needs and opportunities for climate adaptation at the neighborhood level, including landscape decisions, tree canopy, public transportation, building materials, for example. The map is also highlighting neighborhoods where language, where age, disabilities, access to transportation, require focused attention to enhance adaptation efforts. So we've completed the databasing at the census tract level, and we're working to complete the next phase, which takes this down to individual neighborhoods and neighborhood scale. So stay tuned as we launch this tool. This is really going to be a really important and exciting tool as we move forward. So, okay, that was a little level setting. I want to shift to some of the work area deep dives, and I'm going to start by giving the mic to Jamie Harkins to talk about the circular economy focus area.
Thank you, Jonathan. Hi, everyone. As Jonathan said, my name's Jamie, and I am the interim manager of the circular materials team at the city. And we just wanted to give you tonight a breadth, a little bit of exposure to all the areas of work that we take on, and that does include waste and consumption. And so a few years ago, we began to explore Boulder's role in transitioning from a linear to a circular economy. And this is where materials are kept in use as long as possible and waste is designed out of the global economy, no small feat. And we really wanted to look at the climate impact of all the stuff that Boulder buys and uses. And next slide, please. So we worked with some consultants to launch this effort. And on the left here is a finding from their Circular Boulder report that the emissions embodied in all the products we consume as a community is larger than all the sources of emissions, local sources of emissions combined, and that reductions in our consumption therefore have a really huge impact. And so this finding is really driving some reevaluation of our work moving forward. We've been focused on just diverting waste and getting it into the recycling compost streams for decades now, but we're really starting to look at all of this differently. And so as we move forward, this work will still include all of that work we've been doing, getting stuff out of the trash, but it will also include a focus on that reduce and reuse part of the equation, such as reuse of waste from the construction sector, as well as our new repeater takeout container program. We've been partnering with the company Repeater. So I put the website on there. Y'all should go and sign up. And then we are also working on larger systemic changes to our product economy, such as the Colorado Producer Responsibility Bill that was just signed by Governor Polis. And that will truly transform the material economy here in the state of Colorado. So we are very excited that it doesn't go live till 2026. So we have a lot of work to do between now and then to get this bill and everything that's involved in it up and running. And so while I could talk about that for the rest of the hour, I will turn things over to my colleague Rella.
So hi everyone, I'm Rella Abernathy and I'm part of the Natural Climate Solutions team. So natural climate solutions use the power of living systems as a biological bridge to reducing carbon from the atmosphere and putting it where it belongs by harnessing the power of plants to pull carbon into the soil and into the living organisms that are part of thriving ecosystems. So healing degraded lands and improving land management practices are projected to provide at least 30% of our targets to stay under 2 degrees. And we can start seeing those benefits from these changes in the near term. So our team is working across all landscapes, including wetlands, wildlands, and agriculture. But I'm going to give you a quick tour of our new urban focus program that we just launched, Cool Boulder, which is a community-based initiative to reduce urban heat and cool the city by transforming our landscaping to provide shade, mitigate extreme weather events, including flood and drought, and supporting biodiversity conservation. So these are our 3 focus areas of ecological resilience, which are connected canopies, pollinator pathways, and absorbent landscapes. Next. So the objective of connected canopies is to increase the diversity of our urban forestry canopy and get more trees out there. So we are trying to get 20,000 trees planted over the next few years that can capture an amazing amount of carbon and reduce temperatures and also help us with stormwater mitigation. Next. Oh, there were our targets. Next. Okay, so pollinator corridors allow us to expand biodiverse and connected habitat across the city, which creates a bridge to riparian corridors and open space that surrounds us to support birds and insect populations, but it also provides migration routes for those species who are on the move to higher elevations and cooler temperatures. Next. I have the next slide, please. Okay, there. So the absorbent landscapes portion of our program heals degraded land and can restore and enhance ecosystem services like cooling, stormwater infiltration, and life-sustaining biodiversity, which greatly increase the capacity of local ecosystems to hold and cycle water, as well as carbon and absorb terrestrial heat. So these actions can range from things like organic turf management and utilizing biochar and compost to boost the soil food web, to building low-tech water retention structures in surrounding grasslands and forests. So next. So we have many community science opportunities, including the heat urban mapping campaign you may have heard about, and pollinator surveys and land assessment. Next. And we're also making sure that we can get the materials that we need to produce that are in short supply and get those distributed. So we're working on the supply and different plant propagation distribution programs. Next. So this is truly a community partner-based program with multiple partners, and we already have all of these organizations signed up and more asking to join nearly every day. So our point is to leverage our resources, connecting with each other to mobilize at the scale and the speed that we need to do to see the measurable benefits that are under our own control. And that also gives people hope. Next is my colleague Carolyn talking about clean energy.
Thank you, everyone, and I'll remember to drive for myself so I don't ask for the next slide and wait. So again, I'm Carolyn Elam. I'm manager of energy systems work, and I'm joined by my colleague Matt Lehrman, who's going to talk about some specific projects that we have up and coming. But again, I think this is core, and I just want to take the moment to really appreciate the Empower Our Future group and the many of you who are listening, because I'm going to talk about a lot of things you've been really instrumental in and continue to challenge us around, which I truly appreciate. I've been with the city for 4 years and can't imagine a more rewarding job than I've experienced the last 4 years working with the many of you, and really, not just addressing our mitigation roles now, but really bringing equity to our energy systems. So I put this, I'm going to talk a little bit about where we've come so far, our work together, and what we've truly accomplished. I want to just really take a moment to celebrate this. But I'm going to start with just a little bit of a story, a little bit of a journey. I was remembering just recently that it's been not quite 2 decades now where I was approached by a colleague of mine wanting me to sign a petition. The petition was to put an item on the Colorado state ballot. And that petition was not just successful in getting the ballot initiative, but the work of the people behind that initiative got it passed. And we had the first voter-led renewable portfolio standard in the country. I know that probably everybody here listening had some role and was party to that if you were old enough to be around 2 decades ago when that was passed. And it's an amazing thing because it forced our utilities to figure it out. And in figuring it out, they discovered something they weren't expecting, which is the value proposition renewables represent to their bottom line. And it really changed the whole conversation where they were fighting renewables on the system to suddenly, hey, we can meet the state's requirement, but we're actually probably going to be able to go even farther. And suddenly, over the course of a decade, the conversation changed from no to, well, 50% is going to be feasible. So then this community of Boulder said, 50% isn't even close to where we need to be, and we need to do more. And we launched into the municipalization project. And I know, whether you support a municipalization or not, the effect of that project is just still profound. And I think we should all really celebrate that. It wasn't about where does Boulder get its power from necessarily. It was about creating a conversation about how communities want more, demand more, expect more, and how they get there and how they're willing to take on a fight to get there. Soon came La Plata, United Power, others, the voices grew, and the utilities paid attention. And today, we're still not quite there. We have a lot more work to do. But statewide, we're looking at being at 90% or approaching 90% renewables by 2030, which you could not have imagined 2 years ago or 20 years ago when we started the journey towards just requiring renewables on the system. And so I really want us to take a moment to just really celebrate that. And also to appreciate, the tax dollars and the support that's gone to the staff who really participated in rulemaking around all of these changes we've had, have helped our legislators as they craft new legislation, have worked through stakeholder processes and really engaged. And we can really celebrate a lot of the policy reform. We have the Clean Energy Plan, which sets greenhouse gas targets for us. We crafted the first statewide community garden legislation in the country. We continue to expand on community solar gardens and net metering, including Senator Fenberg's bill, which which passed recently, really expanded how net metering is, bringing more virtual net metering onto plate, simplifying the process. And then our climate change lawsuit against ExxonMobil and Suncor, which continues to proceed. So, this is how we've really driven system change. It really changed not just Boulder in the local context, but really the world. Utilities across the country are paying attention. The conversation's just really changed. We were not talking about how we're going to close the 95% gap in our emissions. We're now talking about the last 10, maybe 5% and what's involved there. Other things I want to highlight, we have probably somewhere north of 53 megawatts of solar already installed in our community. As Jonathan mentioned, we're well towards our goal. We also have our 14 megawatts of hydro. Just this past year, we put into commission the first municipally owned and operated community solar garden in the country. This solar garden was one that's the city built, and it provides zero cost subscriptions to community members in the Ponderosa Mobile Home Park. This is a pilot program that we expect to expand into the future. We've given out over $1 million in grants to lower income community members and nonprofit organizations so that they can install solar and benefit from the cost savings and green benefits that come with that. We've done projects to add solar to our own city facilities, including really a groundbreaking retrofit of a parking garage that hadn't been done nationally. We now have 2 garages that have solar added to the top of them. We have community programs that have really put money back into the community and helped our businesses and our residents really be leaders in making the transition. This included establishing, starting from 2 men in the truck to what is now a model that's been replicated nationally for advising and rebate services that really help break down the barriers for those looking to make improvements to their homes or businesses. Through the programs and your dollars, we've made improvements to over 5,000 residential homes and over 1,200 businesses. These improvements are efficiency improvements, electrification and solar installations. We put out more than $8 million in rebates, leveraged over 28 million in private investments towards those projects, and avoided about 20,000 tons of carbon. On the regulatory front, we launched smart regs, fully implemented now. This is really a program designed to bring up the building stock to a minimum standard so that renters are also having an equitable cost for energy and are able to participate and benefit from efficiency and other improvements. This model continues to be one of interest nationally. We constantly get calls about how they might adopt, other communities might adopt some of these principles and what we've learned. Over 7,000 rental properties were upgraded through this program. That's about half of our rental properties that are licensed in the city of Boulder. Over 4,000 tons of carbon reduced, saved over $500,000 in energy costs for those renters. We have the building performance requirements, which require commercial buildings in the city of Boulder to both benchmark their energy usage and also to make improvements to their building through lighting upgrades and other improvements. We were amongst the first nationally to adopt such programs and the first in Colorado to actually include that efficiency component. We continue to see year-over-year savings, and this year marks the completion of the first major round of upgrades to over 50,000 square foot buildings. So we will see those benefits in the coming emissions reporting. We have among the most aggressive building codes in the country. Recently, I've been asked, when's Boulder going to the 2021 code? Well, we passed the 2021 code in 2020. We're still about 20 to 30% better than national code. We already have net zero for residential over 3,000 square feet. We have EV and solar required in both residential and commercial construction. So we're well on our way to our roadmap goal, which I'll talk about in a minute. Transportation electrification, proud of our community. We continue to lead the state in adoption of electric vehicles. We've installed over 48 chargers in the community that the city owns and operates. We facilitated expansion of fast charging. We continue to innovate, and Matt's going to talk about some projects there in a few minutes. So where are we going? Where do we envision the future? And again, as Jonathan said, this is just a sampling to give you a sense of where we're heading and where we think we need to head. We do have our roadmap to get to net zero all new construction by 2031. We continue along that trajectory and continue to lead our community and our neighbors along that journey. We will start regulating embodied carbon in our buildings, so not just operational carbon, but also the materials of construction, both in terms of infrastructure as well as the buildings themselves, moving towards all electric. We've already seen great progress on the residential side, as well as voluntary progress on our commercial side, but really regulating that. We're looking at the next generation of how we improve our existing buildings through things like smart regs and building performance ordinance, as well as our voluntary programs to really get the rest of the natural gas out. If we're going to hit our goal, we need to drive natural gas out of our buildings by 2035. It's not an easy undertaking. And so we really need to focus on breaking down the financial and technical and workforce barriers that our businesses and our residents face. So we're really focusing in on new financing tools such as tariff on bill financing, enhanced load products where we really leverage large capital, as well as turnkey solutions where it takes the challenge out of knowing where to start, knowing how to undertake it, and really kickstarting these projects. As Jonathan said, we continue to work towards exceeding our local generation goal by 2030, leveraging some of the new tools available to us. So really focusing on some of the underserved properties that we've seen to date, which are multi-tenant, multi-commercial programs, multifamily. Really want to advance equity within that context. Not everybody has access to good roof space. So thinking about how we can better serve all community members. And then our local generation has really been focused on getting the megawatts of solar installed. We really need to now focus on designing for resilience by taking advantage of things like microgrids, energy storage, and really accelerating our work there. Energy equity has to be a focus. Too many in our community are already burdened. And as Jonathan showed you, the heat maps and others, that problem is going to get worse, not better. Many in our community are particularly vulnerable to the rising costs of energy, the issues of air quality. So really centering that within our program designs and really focusing on our most vulnerable housing stock. Really, again, doubling down on some of our recent air quality work to address the role buildings and natural gas combustion plays in both indoor and outdoor air pollution, really making sure we're coupling energy saving or cost saving benefits through weatherization and solar incorporated with those projects. Leveraging our partnerships that we've established to continue advancing equity, such as our partnership with Energy Outreach Colorado, who helps our underserved populations. Working with the large solar developers to take advantage of the over 60 megawatts of low-income solar gardens that were just approved by the Public Utilities Commission, something that we work very hard to advocate for and really support. There's programs specifically in there for Boulder. Working to transform our markets, really moving our HVAC industry to work towards electrification and stop pushing natural gas appliances. Continue our work in policy and regulation. As I mentioned, leveraging private capital to bring the dollars we need so that we can break down the financial barriers to our community who needs to transition our building stock and our transportation systems, and really focus in on bringing the next generation of workforce to serve our needs. Of course, we need to close the gaps. They're significant. We're going to need innovative solutions that we really want to look to our community and our partners to help us innovate and develop, to include advanced storage technologies, hydrogen systems, district energy. We're continuing to advance our work at Alpine Balsam to explore district system, bringing in smart grids and smart technology, innovative new program models. Matt will talk a little bit about that, and making utilities scale investments. So with that, I am going to pass it to Matt Lehrman.
Thank you, Carolyn. Good evening, everyone. I'm Matt Lehrman. I'm the policy advisor for energy utilities for the city of Boulder and the Department of Climate Initiatives. I wish we could be together in person tonight, but unfortunately not just yet, soon enough. So as Carolyn said, I'm going to talk about a few different things. One will be some of the transportation electrification work that we're undertaking, and two, some of our renewable electricity or zero emissions electricity work that we are focused on. So I think Carolyn mentioned, but we have, you may recall in September of 2020, we launched a pilot project at North Boulder Rec Center to test what's called bidirectional electric vehicle charging. So I think everyone's probably, hopefully, familiar with one-way charging, where you plug in your car and put electricity in the battery to drive it instead of putting gas in. Well, the idea here is that not only can we charge the car, we can also pull power out of the battery as well to, in this case, reduce the demand charges at the building. So the way that it works, you can see on this bottom chart here, is that when building demand is low, we can charge the vehicle. And when demand is high, if the vehicle is available, it's not being used as the fleet vehicle by the Parks and Rec department, we can discharge the battery and lower some of the building costs. And in that way, and so in that 18 months that we've had the program launched, we on average reduce peak demand by about 13 kilowatts. And the average demand charge is around, say, $19 a kilowatt. It's a little bit lower in the winter, a little bit higher in the summer. So we save on the order of $240, $250 a month in bill charges and demand charges. And the accounting isn't so easy this way, but you can imagine that's, you know, on the order of the cost of a lease of a Nissan Leaf for 2 years. So in essence, you know, in many ways, there's a free vehicle for the city. It doesn't work quite as simply as that, but the savings are real, the technology is real, and we are now progressing along in partnership with Xcel to expand the pilot. They were impressed by our results, and we said, are there opportunities to expand? We'd love to be able to test other businesses, at residential, you know, at homes. And they said, yeah, you know, if you have one car, I wonder if we get, you know, the same or more savings with like 3 or 4 cars. And we said, well, what if we paired that with car sharing? We had a pod of cars that were electric, they were for car share, but they were also at a building where we think we could reduce demand charges. So if we can find that correct location, it'd be a situation where there would be car share, Xcel would pay for charging station installation, and then we would have a 1 or 2 year pilot to see exactly that, and then ultimately the charging stations would remain. So I think it's a really interesting, you know, example of innovative technology that the city demonstrated before most others had, and then ultimately, in this case, Xcel, a major utility, said, "Wow, that's impressive. We'd like to invest and, you know, be a part of that." So stay tuned for more information on that soon. But that's a good example. But that's not the only thing that we're doing in EVs. We are pretty heavily invested in transit electrification. Our partners at Via Mobility have acquired some land that we hope to develop into a shared transit hub where BDSD and Via can invest together to spread the cost of charging infrastructure so they can electrify more buses more quickly. We initially did a workshop with Rocky Mountain Institute almost 3 years ago now that tried to set a blueprint for that, and that's exactly what we're working towards. And I think also, as Carolyn mentioned, there's a lot of opportunities for charging right now. Like if you want to buy an electric car, you can drive anywhere in the state in Colorado. There's fast charging from every major provider in Boulder today. Xcel offers on-bill financing for single-family homes, for multi-family homes, for businesses. So there might be a few gaps in places where there's not a charging product available, and we can help you with that. But you know, if you buy an electric car, there will be a place for you to charge at home or in public and across Colorado as well. So now is the time to buy an electric car, as Carolyn said. Next slide. I'm not a car salesman either. You know, ride your bike and walk and take the bus too, for sure. The other side of what we focus on is what we call 100% renewables or zero emissions electricity. I think as our work has transitioned from a focus on the municipal utility to a partnership with Xcel, it's given us an opportunity to kind of reconceptualize how we think about this and how we want to solve the problem. So what you see here is kind of this question of like, what is the point of 100% renewables? And on the left side, there are ways that you can call yourself 100% renewable on an annual basis that may or may not add new renewables to the grid. It may or may not reduce emissions. But from a legal perspective, you can claim to be 100% renewable. For some people, that's absolutely achieving the goal. And we think we can go a little bit farther and a little bit faster in Boulder by focusing on a few other efforts. So instead of what we wanted to do is say, what is the point of 100% renewables? Is it just to make that claim, or do we want to have zero emissions electricity? And if that latter is the case, then what we really need to work for is what you see, or work toward is what you see on the right side, which is 24/7 renewables, or zero emissions electricity, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And that's a difficult problem to solve from an engineering perspective, from a policy perspective, from a financial and regulatory perspective. But we can move in that direction, and we can hopefully do it aggressively by focusing, I think, on the middle part, which is the so-called close the emissions gap, to say, if we are a customer of Xcel, what are our annual emissions? What are our hourly emissions from electricity? And are there steps we can take, strategies and tactics that would reduce emissions by the amount that Boulder is responsible for? So it doesn't necessarily get us to 24/7, but we are making investments that result in incremental emissions reduction beyond where Xcel would otherwise go. So this is kind of a very high level summary of where we're at right now. We know where Xcel has been historically from an emissions perspective and from a generation mix, coal and natural gas, hydro, wind, solar, and so forth. We know they have a 2050 goal for carbon-free electricity. We know we have our 2030 goal. And now through the electric resource plan, which is still under consideration right now, we have at least a sense directionally of where Xcel will be by 2030. And we think maybe around 85% emissions reduction, might be a little bit less, might be a little bit more, depends on how a few different things shake out. But assuming 85%, we think that emissions gap between 0 or 100% renewable and 85% reduced is about 175,000 short tons. So the question then for us as a city and as a community is, what are the investments that we make to actually reduce that, either by 175,000 short tons or more? Another way to think about it, just to illustrate this, is when we think about, I think historically, it's been easy to think about 100% renewables just in terms of energy. You say we have 1.2 million megawatt hours of annual consumption in Boulder, so let's just go buy 1.2 million megawatt hours of renewables. And it could be, they might all happen in the spring somewhere or in the fall. We don't really line them up on an hourly or even monthly basis. It's just at the end of the year, what did we buy? And that's, when we're talking about 100% renewable energy, that's what we're focused on. But when we're talking about zero emissions electricity or zero emissions or 24/7 renewables, we want to focus on both energy and capacity. It's two different sides of the same coin. And so what this chart will show you is that in 2030, on an energy basis, Xcel might be able to say, hey, we're 80 or 85% renewable. But the capacity they have on the system, there's still going to be a lot of carbon, and it's going to be a lot of natural gas primarily. And the reason for that is because they have a lot of gas plants that sit idle for most of the year. They might only run 2 or 3 or 5 or 10% of the time. So that's the kind of thing that we'd like to avoid by replacing those gas generators, either reducing the amount they operate even more, and particularly avoiding the scenario in which Xcel buys more of them. So that brown on the left side goes down as well. Ultimately, we need both sides to be green. So back to my first slide, in the 100% renewable scenario, we might be able to claim 100% renewables from an energy basis, but may or may not be able to change generation at all. The system might remain the same, and we can still legally claim from an accounting basis that we are 100%. And the capacity certainly doesn't change. On the 24/7 side, both sides of this graph are going to be green. And on the closing emissions gap, we can actually quantify on an hourly basis is the goal. We haven't gotten there yet. The amount of emissions that we've actually reduced above and beyond. So we're making progress in making both of these bars green over time as we progress towards 2030. And without getting into too much detail right now, I can say that some of the work that's been done is really unprecedented in terms of communities. We've been doing some pretty in-depth modeling with Xcel in terms of hourly emissions, in terms of adding new different types of resources, and modeling that in their system software that they use to model how their system works and what it might look like in the future. And I've never seen it done before in this way. And so we don't have the right answer yet. I think we're making progress, but it's a really exciting time if you want to work with us on zero emissions electricity. That is my last slide, and my apologies, I don't know who's going next.
It's me.
It's Yael.
Yep. Hi. Hi, everyone. I'm Yael Gishan. I'm a project manager in climate initiatives, and I know I've worked with many of you over the years. So I want to say it's nice to see you, because that's kind of what you say in these situations, but I can't actually see you. So it's just nice to be here. So I'll go through mine rather quickly, just to make sure I leave time at the end for us to have questions and answers or any discussion. So I'll start out talking about the proposed tax. So next slide. So the context, which I'm sure you all have been following, is that our current climate action plan tax, which is a fixed rate tax, is set to expire in March of 2023. So if we do nothing, that climate funding that we currently have was going would decrease by about $2 million a year. So the proposal in place is to take the existing cap tax, which is set to expire, and the utility occupation tax, which currently funds the work under the Excel partnership. Together, those two taxes collect about $4 million annually, and we are proposing to combine those and raise the funds to a $5 million annual target through the mechanism of the utility occupation tax. And so with the utility occupation tax, since it's a fixed revenue tax rather than a fixed rate tax, Excel adjusts the rate based on the actual revenues to collect the total amount of funds that would be due to the city. So that would change the rate for customers. So currently, and I'll show a table next, the burden is a little bit heavier on residential, and that would move to the commercial sector since it's based on actual revenues. The proposal is also to collect through 2040 and to be able to issue debt against the proceeds from the tax. So this next slide shows the proposed annual rate changes. Together, the current rate that includes the cap and the utility occupation tax, and the proposed rate would be the new utility occupation tax with that $5 million target. Next slide. And so my colleagues did a really nice job of talking about things that we're currently doing and things that we are hoping to scale up and where we hope to focus our attention. And this is a lot of text on a slide, and it's very small, so I certainly won't go through it all. But just wanted to give you all a sense of when we talk about scaling up action and how we would use some of this new funding. These are the ideas that we are talking about and kind of the examples of the big moves, which is just a phrase we're using to call some of the bigger things that we think have leverage and can really move us towards greater systems level change in the different focus areas. And so in some cases, we would be scaling up successes, things that we're currently doing. And in other cases, we would be shifting our priorities. And again, my colleagues talked quite a bit about that. So I won't go into specific details, but we can certainly come back to this if there's questions here. So next, I wanted to talk a little bit about the polling that we recently did on the climate tax proposal, and just wanted to highlight a few key things that felt quite important. And so for this climate tax that will be on the ballot this fall, most likely if council moves that forward in August, the question was asked if the over 1,000 respondents, I think it was 1,180, that's what it says on the bottom of the slide, responded, would you vote to approve it or reject it? And 78% would vote to approve it. Next slide. We also asked a series of questions about how worried people are about the impacts of climate change in Boulder, and 78% of folks said they were worried or extremely worried. And then the next slide shows how the #1 issue facing Boulder, and people were asked to rank in order of importance and given a list of issues, and addressing the impacts of climate change was quite far ahead of the other really quite important issues as well that we're facing in our community, but just to show the gravity of what's happening. And then next, I'm going to just talk about some upcoming opportunities to engage and learn more about what we're doing and have an opportunity for more of a two-way dialogue, hopefully in a bit of a different format, so we can hear from you all more as well. The next slide talks about the climate conversation series that we're launching. So we'll have each of our 3 focus areas that you heard about tonight have a targeted session that'll have more of an opportunity for two-way dialogue during these series. And we'll start with the energy systems on June 29th, the circular economy on July 18th, and natural climate solutions on August 17th. And then another interesting project that we're we've been up to is one of our new communications staff, Leah, who's come with some really new creative and innovative ideas, put together this audio collage where she has asked the community to record their visions of hope. So there's a prompt. Folks record an answer to the prompt, and then she can put together a collage of those answers. And we did have a little snippet here to share, but it's about 4 minutes long, so I won't play it. If there's no questions, we can come back to it and play it for you. But I also did want to mention, while we're still on the engagement piece, that we are also working on some targeted engagement sessions around the tax and climate change impacts that people are experiencing in our community. So we're working to schedule those with folks in the business community, as well as a series of events with folks in our more impacted communities like Boulder Housing Partners and our partners in Flows, and working also with some of our community connectors through our engagement and communications department. Next slide. We do have some job openings. Just wanted to put a little plug here for a Natural Climate Solutions Programs Manager, which would be a third person on the Natural Climate Solutions team. And that application closes on June 24th. And then Jamie is currently in the interim role for the Circular Economy Senior Manager. So we are posting that position as well right now, which is due by July 8th. Next slide. Here's how you can connect with us. We have this new email, contactclimateinitiatives@bouldercolorado.gov. And that is a wrap from me.
Yael, thank you so much. I would say, I was just looking to see if we had any real-time questions coming in during the presentation. There aren't any yet. And so what I thought we could do is there are a couple things that I wanted to just add. First of all, thank you to the team here. It's an incredible amount of context. Hopefully you all can see the kind of work that's in motion right now. And again, to amplify the point, this does not really encompass everything that's going on within the department. We're trying to give some highlights in terms of what's in motion, where you see things coming, and how you can plug into some of this work. I wouldn't mind going back and playing the audio collage, because one of the things that we've been really trying to do as a department is make sure that our community feels supported and they can see themselves in this process. And one of the things we talk a lot about is how do we find that hope and courage when we are all really challenged with a number of crises. And so I think this audio collage is a really interesting tool that we're starting to explore more of. One thing I did want to mention is in one of those previous slides, Yael mentioned a couple of job openings. One of the questions that we received early on had to do with staffing levels. And just to clarify that those are 2 positions that have been vacant for some time. We're not intending to add new positions. We try to create a really nice balance and make sure that we're doing the work of the community and for the community, using the funds in the most effective way we can. So those are vacancies that we have been sitting on for some time. There was one question that just came in, and it's a great question with respect to how we deal with trees on private property. So Rella, you're willing to jump in on this one too, but Jim asked the question, does Boulder protect existing trees on private property? This has been an interesting one that I think we've seen surface over the past year to 2 years in terms of how the city's current rules and regulations actually do serve to protect trees, and when in fact we need to really beef up some of those regulations. We have been talking about new regulations that would extend. This is a tricky issue in terms of how far the city can go in terms of protecting rights of private homeowners. But Rella, is there anything you want to add at this point? Because I know it's on our work plan to revisit and go back to council and talk about what this would look like in terms of any changes to our current regulations.
Yeah, in addition to the regulatory aspects, we're really trying to equip the community with the knowledge and the resources they need to protect trees. So that's what the Tree Tenders program, which has been run through the Play Foundation, works with Parks and Rec, is working on too. So we're trying to come at it from all the different angles, that we need to do, because trees are so precious and we need to make sure that they're surviving.
Thanks. And so I would imagine you're going to see a fair amount of information coming out on that over the next year, particularly as we get the Natural Climate Solutions team up and moving, because that is certainly a big piece of how we deal with our tree protection and our expansion, as Rella was talking about in her presentation. So there are a number of questions that are rolling in. I'm going to try to capture these. And as I said, if we don't get to these in the next 5 minutes, we will capture these and we will do our best to write up responses to these. I do want to mention one question that is around those big moves that Yael showed on one of the slides. So we have been spending quite a bit of time as a department over the past year or so, really thinking not necessarily around the text, but what is the next generation of our work? What are the big moves that we ought to be thinking about as a city? What is the city's role within that? What is the community's role? And how do we really advance some of those transformational actions? And so the question is about a sampling of the big moves. And there was some of that highlighted in the slide, but as Yael pointed out, it was small text and we went through it pretty quickly. In addition to looking at the list of things that we're doing in those big 4 areas and those transformational moves, we do want to make sure that we're hearing directly from the community on the ideas that you all have. So that's one of the things that we want to be doing in terms of our engagement strategy over the next couple of months. So when we talk about if we continue to receive the funding that we get and expand it, how would we use those funds in addition to what we know we need to continue doing already? So what are some of those big moves? So that's going to be something that we're going to be doing. There is a link and we can make sure you have access to that in some of the materials that we provided to City Council. They had a greatly expanded list of some of the big moves that we are thinking about right now. So I want to try to hit these fairly quickly. Let me just see. Sorry, I'm going through these.
So Jonathan, while you're looking, I can answer Jim's other question.
Oh, great. Please do. Thanks.
Whether we require passive lighting and heating. We don't require it, but through the fairly stringent energy use per square foot requirements embedded in both of our residential and commercial code, passive solutions are definitely favored within that context. I think we'll continue to explore through the next code update whether we need to go farther and deeper in that. So that is definitely on our list to consider. I'll also note that Excel just added a increased new construction incentive focused on passive as well, that I think we really want to make sure we educate our community around and look to leverage into our new construction projects.
Hey, Jonathan, this is Paul. Just want to
Hi,
step
Paul.
in here and say, great job, you guys. But our hour's about up, but we will extend the hour if you so desire. So, we want to respect your time. If you got to go, you got to go. But if you want to stay, let's keep going.
Sure. I don't want to speak for my team, but certainly if we let's go a little bit longer, if that's okay, folks. If you have another 5 minutes or so, I think that would be good to try to answer some of these questions in real time. Thanks, Paul. I really appreciate that. And those of you that are out there, if you need to drop off, totally understand. And please know, again, we will capture these questions in writing and try to provide a written response as quickly as we can. One of the questions I did want to speak to, Evan asked a really good question about what's the city doing to get RTD to right size buses and thinking about how we could do it more locally. I'm going to answer this more broadly because one of the things we have been doing very intentionally over the past year, even a little bit longer, is trying to be more effective in thought partnership with other city departments. I think most of you probably know, as a department, I wouldn't say we're fully an appendage, but oftentimes issues related to climate or resilience or sustainability can sometimes be an afterthought, and that is just part of the evolution of this work. I have to really give a huge amount of credit to our colleagues in other departments who have really begun embracing and really starting to lead from the space of climate and resilience and equity. So my answer to this is not directly to Evan's question, except to say that we have created new openings in discussion with our colleagues in transportation, in open space, and doing many pilot projects. And I'm very excited about how we start to really respond to the climate crisis as an organization, not just a department. And I am just, as I said, really excited about how we are really starting as an organization to make that a key priority in all that we are doing. It's going to take some time, no question, and we will make some mistakes along the way. But at least in the time that I have been with the city, I've never seen the type of support that we're seeing right now from other departments and other directors of departments. And so transportation is obviously going to be a key issue in terms of our work in climate. And so it's not just the piece that is around electrification, but how we're thinking deeply about our mobility solutions and options. And so stay tuned, because I do think there is a lot of discussion happening there on the buses piece and the mobility piece, Evan.
So Jonathan, I'll ask one. Leslie had asked the question about how the ballot language would be written and whether it considers the option of more competitive electricity future. I think specifically gets at, does the ballot language in any way tie us to continuing our relationship with Excel or not? So I think we've gotten that question as well from council during our study session. And if we were to, it doesn't bind us to our continued relationship with the utility. We'd either levy the tax on a new utility that would replace it, and or explore a replacement ballot initiative. So I think that would be our answer to that question. It definitely does not constrain us to our existing relationship, though. They're just our mechanism by which we collect. We typically write this for our serving utility.
Thanks, Carolyn. I'm sorry for those who are listening. It feels like we're cherry picking. It's really just trying to see which ones we can maybe get to quickly. I did want to maybe make a comment. KK, I see your comment. It's really great to see your name and, well, at least see you writing. The question is about our tree work and our encouragement to plant more trees, but a very good and wise comment about making sure that we're considering solar access and fire danger issues that should be addressed. What I want to say to that is absolutely one of the comments that links to my previous comment is, as we now think about resilience in the broader sense, for the first time, we're more deeply connected to the fire department, to open space, to planning, to parks and recreation. So we're really thinking about this very holistically and not just thinking that we want to plant trees. It's planting trees in the right places and planting trees for the benefits they can provide in those places. So some of the amazing work that's going to come out of some of the heat mapping that we're doing is recognizing that there are appropriate places that can create substantial cooling opportunities for neighborhoods that may predominantly don't have air conditioning in those neighborhoods, for example. And so it isn't just planting trees for the sake of planting trees. We actually have to think about the water associated with planting and maintaining those trees. And that's another tension that we have to take into consideration. So I really appreciate the comment. And yes, solar access, it's, as you probably know, KK, Boulder has had a long-standing relationship between tree canopy and solar access with our solar access ordinance that was created. I don't remember when that was actually created, 96 or something like that. So anyway, that is something we'll be following very closely.
Jonathan, we have a question about what feedback we're getting from the chamber and large businesses on the new proposed tax and the increase that it might represent to them.
Yeah, thanks. I didn't see that one, Carolyn. So Yael mentioned the results of the polling. We do have a business-specific survey that we're going to be releasing in the next couple of weeks, and we have met with the chamber, and we'll be giving a presentation to their community affairs committee here in a couple of weeks. And in some of the outreach that we're doing, it was a good reminder to be more specific on the information we're putting out. I think there was a fear in that chart that Yael showed in terms of the increases, that somehow that was a monthly figure versus an annual figure. Obviously, the chamber is a big supporter of climate action. And we are very sensitive that we don't want to compound the cost of doing business in Boulder. So it's not just this impact, but what are the other impacts that businesses might be seeing and feeling? And we want to be sensitive to that. And so far, the conversations have been incredibly positive. We have not heard from and spoken to all businesses, of course. But right now, the way we describe it is that businesses and residents, there's been a little bit of disproportionate and subsidization in some way, where residents have been paying 2/3 of the tax historically, and are basically responsible for about 1/3 of our community's emissions. And that's been the case since the tax began in 2006. And so we'll continue to invest a significant amount of money in our businesses. And so we have helped decrease the burden in terms of their cost overall, because of the money that we do push into the business community for reducing consumption, increasing efficiency, so forth and so on. And so that's not going to change. And we need to get out there and make sure that businesses understand those benefits aren't going away. And we'll work with them to understand their concerns on a deeper level. So right now, it's part of our engagement strategy over the next couple of months to hear more directly from businesses. So why don't I suggest this? I see we are continuing to get a good number of questions. I feel like this is a good list, unless there are any that anybody wants to jump on right away. I see some in the chat. I see about 20 in the Q&A. Paul, can we work with you to capture these questions to make sure that we get these dropped into a document?
Absolutely. Be glad to do that.
Okay. With that, I think we have lost Yael, and I'm going to think we've lost some participants as well. So if you all allow me, I think we'll call it a wrap for now, and we will try to get to answering these questions as quickly as we can. We'll make sure that Empower Our Future and the team has those and can push those out. I think we talked about getting them out with the recording of this session. So again, I want to appreciate and acknowledge all of the hard questions. It's important that you are asking them, and it's important that we are able to answer them. So we need to do this in partnership with all of you. I appreciate you taking your time again on such a beautiful evening. Anything that comes up that you have not been able to address through this format, Yael put that contact climate initiatives on the screen. Please feel free to reach out directly or to any of us on this call. With that, I really want to appreciate everybody and say thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. I really appreciate you guys taking the time and a little extra time for us. And Carolyn and Jamie and Matt and Rella, thank you guys for coming and doing this.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
I forgot. I was getting the hook off the stage. On Tuesday night at the Public Utilities Commission, there will be public comment session on the Renewable Energy Standard Plan application. It is the application where Xcel proposes capacity for local generation, community solar, the Renewable Connect products. And I think most interestingly, right now, there are, because of the work we did with Senator Fenberg, last year, there is now approval for offsite net metering and multi-tenant property net metering, and those proposals to implement are within this plan. So if you feel the inclination to show up at the Public Utilities Commission and opine on the importance of those topics, Tuesday night, 5 to 7, it's all online as well. So you can do it from the comfort of your own home or wherever you choose.
Great. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, and Matt, is that the 21st then?
Yes.
Okay.
I think so. Whatever Tuesday is. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Upcoming. Thank
Yes.
you.
Great.
Yeah, thank you all. Really appreciate you all working so hard for our city.
Okay. And for those people still with us, I just want to remind you that the July 21st Empower Hour with Jeff Cyphers of Sonoma Clean Power on community choice segregation, and then August 18th, our South Boulder Creek flood plan presentation. And you can sign up at empowerourfuture.org. And with that, I think it is a wrap.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Night.